Before I play the fugue again, a few remarks on form and the interaction of the voices. You could compare a fugue to a conversation. This fugue has 3 voices. 3 people come together and talk about a subject. Each person has his or her own view of the subject, which in turn may lead to changes in the subject in the course of time. In a real conversation, one person talks and the others listen. In the music, that would not sound very interesting. Here, everybody is actively engaged in the process at the same time, which produces the interesting effect of harmony or dissonance whenever they come together. As the voices interact, each of them gets to have the subject, and each gets to accompany. The subject is present throughout the piece. As I said before, it will undergo changes and appear in different keys. As in a conversation that is productive, the music is supposed to go somewhere, produce some kind of resolution, rather than just repeat itself infinitely. Usually, fugues have one subject. This fugue is an exception insofar as it has 3 subjects, and here they are. This is the first subject. This is the second subject. And this is the third subject. As you can hear, they are quite different from each other. Those 3 subjects determine the parts that you find marked in your score. The fugue has 4 parts altogether, and they merge into each other. Within those 4 large parts, you can distinguish sections where the complete subject is present and where it is not present. According to the German tradition, I have called the parts where the subject is present a development. A development is usually considered complete when each voice has had the subject once, or when there have been as many subject entries as there are voices, and occasionally you will come across a development that's incomplete. Episodes are sections where the full subject does not appear. They often use material from the subject, though. Episodes have a transitory function. They connect developments, and they also prepare new ideas. With the awareness of different subjects, parts, and sections in the piece, let's listen to the fugue again. At the beginning of every fugue, one voice alone states the subject. There's no accompaniment. Ask yourself what the character of that subject is as you hear it again. When we look at it in terms of the musical elements, we notice that it starts with a falling F sharp minor triad, then the melody goes up a 6 and stops, which results in a syncopation, and the motive ends with a 2/16, then it happens again, 2/16, and it trickles out in this trill. In terms of motion and energy, it's somewhat of a stop and go, similar to the beginning of the prelude. The general tendency of the melody is falling. The middle voice has the first subject entry. The second entry follows in the soprano in measure 4. We call it the answer because the beginning is slightly altered in order to accommodate the fact that it starts on a different pitch. So the subject starts with a triad, and the answer starts like this. The third entry of the subject comes in measure 8 and 9. It's the same pitch as the beginning, an octave lower. I'm going to play all 3 subject entries, and you may want to listen for the way the different register where they appear affects their character and the feeling that comes with them. Two measures of a little extension, and the bass comes in with the third entry. The subject or the answer are accompanied by the other voices in free counterpoint. I'm going to play the middle voice as it accompanies the answer. The accompanying voice often takes on ideas we recognize from the subject. Here we recognize the rhythm of those leaps, and we also find the 16th motive. But what really catches the attention is the fact that the motives are so short. They sound like comments rather than whole sentences, and it's just very fragmentary if you listen to that voice by itself. Together with the answer, though, the two voices complement each other like they did in the prelude. One fills the space that the other leaves open. I'm going to play from measure 4 once again, the answer and the counterpoint. The same tendency in the accompaniment and the counterpoint continues throughout the third subject entry. An image that came to my mind was that of imperfect individuals who support each other to create one functioning whole. The third subject entry is followed by an episode. That's a section where the full subject does not appear. As in a conversation, occasionally we steer away from the topic to a sideline, and that may even bring us a step closer to the solution we set out to find. Something very interesting that has an important effect on the episode happens shortly before its beginning in measure 10 in the middle voice. Remember the opening motive of the answer? Now here in the middle voice, we hear it switched around in inversion. The soprano seems to like that idea because it picks up on it. And throughout the episode, the voices play around with that inverted motive of the answer and the original motive. So they try out different combinations of up and down, and the music sounds very playful, as if the voices are enjoying themselves. I'm going to play into that episode and throughout the episode from measure 10. At this point in measure 16, the soprano comes in with another subject entry. We call this a redundant entry. This fugue has 3 voices, so we would only need 3 entries to complete the exposition. This entry is an extra, and it comes across as a gesture of exuberance, fueled by the first continuously flowing, uninterrupted line in this piece, in the bass. Remember all these fragments we had in the counterpoint so far? So here we have the first uninterrupted line. After that, the first part of the fugue ends in a cadence in A major, and I'm going to play this first part once again. The cadence that ended that first part leads to the second subject. It appears alone in the bass and creates the impression of a new beginning, a second exposition. The new subject is as short as the first subject is long, and it sounds very determined. The dotted rhythm at the beginning gives it great energy, as opposed to, and then it ends with a rising fourth on a downbeat, which gives it something final, and you may also remember the meaning of the falling fourth and the rising fourth that we discussed in the prelude. As in the exposition, we have 4 complete subject entries in this exposition of the second subject. I'm going to play all of them. So the bass begins, followed by the soprano, followed by the middle voice, and the bass has the extra entry. What really catches the attention throughout the second part is this motive with a dotted rhythm. It goes through all the voices at all times throughout the entire part. In the episode that follows, Bach splits the subject apart into the 2 motives. He starts with the rising fourth, and then the dotted rhythm comes in. And so it goes on. The following development begins with the second subject in measure 27. And then we have a surprise. The first subject is back. The middle voice. Joined by the second subject in the bass. So two subjects that are quite different in character are combined here and come together. The episode that follows plays around with elements from the first subject, this inverted answer, and the broken triads. Meet the 16th again. And then part 2 ends with the first subject in the bass. I'm going to play the entire part 2. The second subject, with its determined, confident character, had a solo entry, creating the impression of a new beginning. With the third subject that we encounter in part 3, this is different. It sneaks in the middle voice while the soprano and the bass are still finishing part 2. That's in measure 36. Here's the third subject. And this is how it comes together with the other two voices. Effortless, the third subject begins in the middle voice and spreads out from there. I'm going to play all the subject entries at the beginning of this third part and pay attention to how they hang together. With the other subject entries, there was always a little space between each entry. This really hangs together. The beginnings overlap. Let me play it once again. And that is in character with the general personality of the subject, which is characterized by flow. It's a steady stepwise motion whose direction is balanced between up and down. In comparison to the other two subjects, neither the rhythmic nor the melodic shape of this new subject are very distinct. Let me just play all of them again to remember. So here was our first subject. So very clear, distinct rhythm. And here we these flowing 16th. The inherent power of this new subject becomes evident after the third entry. These small, steady steps are hard to stop. They want to keep going, and they have a tendency to spread out. The subject begins with 4 elements. 1, 2, 3, 4. It appears 3 times, and after that it spreads out to 6 elements. And if you glance ahead at the last page, there, these 16th just go on forever. Part 3 is dominated by the third subject. The other two subjects do not appear. It is divided into 2 sections by a clearly noticeable cadence in G sharp minor. I'm going to play into that from measure 41, and you can also hear this extended subject, this longer subject extended to 6 elements. After that cadence, we come to a section where the music is full of joy. The third subject is mostly in the soprano, and the last subject entry is an inversion, where the intervals that go down are turned upwards and vice versa. So this is what it sounds like in measure 48. It's important to note that from the moment when the third subject appears, the 16th notes are always present in one of the voices as a continuous, uninterrupted current of energy. I'm going to play the entire part 3. It's not hard to guess what's going to happen in part 4, a combination of all 3 subjects. You know them so well by now that I'm going to play it through and leave you to your thoughts, feelings, and observations before we take a closer look together. The overall structure is as follows. We have a development, measure 51 through 58, an episode, measure 57 through 60, the second development, measures 60 through 62, the second episode, measures 63 through 66, and the last development leading into the final section, the coda, and the end of the piece, measures 67 through 70. We're going to focus mainly on the subjects now. And development 1 features a revival of the first subject, which appears alone in the middle voice, accompanied by the 16th in the bass. In the next measure, measure 55, the soprano follows with the answer, with a slightly altered version of the answer. The bass has the third subject. And it goes on from there, and the middle voice has the second subject. I'm going to play these 3 voices together. The following episode plays around with the opening motive of the first subject with these broken triads. And in the second development, the bass has the first subject. The soprano has the third subject, and so forth. And the middle voice has the second subject. I'm going to play them just as they come together, just the subjects at that place. The second episode is very similar to the first one, only that it's in the lower register. And in the last development, which brings the music home to the key of F sharp minor, the soprano has the first subject. The middle voice has the third subject. And the bass has the third subject. So together we get. And at the very end, Bach makes no statement as to minor or major. The voices just end in unison, in agreement, resonance, and unity. Now let's listen to the prelude and fugue one more time.